sources in which we see the Arabs being referred to as Ishmaelites. And one notable example being the ecclesiastical historian Solomon, who you referred to earlier, who had a conception of the Arabs as a lapsed biblical group who sort of forgot their monotheist history and only were reminded of it through their contact with the Jews. It is Solomon's description of how this narrative was internalized by the Arabs credible, and also does it provide a compelling precursor for the Quran's theological and genealogical narrative, because it also has this idea about Ishmaelites and Arabs being this lost biblical group who forgot their monotheist past.
Oh boy, pass. I'm just kidding. This is.
I'm so sorry.
I'm not kidding. This is a big minefield. So I think in many ways that the Ishmaelite origin stories told by people like Solomon and Eusebius, they tell you more about what the Romans thought than what the Arabs thought. There seems to be a desire to integrate different Arab groups into a biblical history, sort of to make them intelligible to Roman audiences. Who are these people? Oh, well, look, they're lapsed Jews because they also practice circumcision, they don't eat pork. That's sort of Solomon's angle. And there's the other thing is there's I want to say it's Cyril Scophopoulos' Life of Saint Euphemius, which is one of the best sources, not in terms of quality, but in terms of detail, about the Christianization of an Arab group in which the leader actually goes on to appear at the Council of Ephesus in 431 and signs his name on the document, so we know that this is actually true. But in there is another discussion of this issue where being Ishmaelites makes them add to the promise. That is, it makes them candidates for baptism. So I think it's a way that Christian authors use to put Arabs into a shared history to make them worthy of conversion and baptism, and to bring them into the Christian commonwealth. To complicate things further, Christian Raban has shown over the last 10 or 15 years how the Himyarites developed a concept of Judaism which he calls Judeo-monotheism, which may be related to Judaism that spread in the diaspora after the Romans destroyed the Second Temple. And so there are a lot of ideas about Judaism floating around in Arabia and its environs, even though there has been this diaspora. And this may also affect Roman conceptions of Arabs who are coming from a region where there is a known sort of a following of Judaism, so to speak. So the idea doesn't seem to come from any one particular place. It does seem to be ideologically motivated, that it is further complicated by the existence of Judeo-monotheism in Himyar. Now, as far as it relates to the Quran, I hesitate to say anything authoritative about this because I'm not sure that anyone really knows. At least I have to be honest to listeners and say that I don't know. This might be better answered by someone else. That in the Roman period, yes, this is the creation of, and this idea goes back all the way back to Eusebius and beforehand, because so much of the Quran shows knowledge of Roman history, and in fact, there's an argument that the Quran even acknowledges the fall of Jerusalem to the Persians, and because of the sort of amazing work done by Quranic scholars now that show the links between the world in which the Quran was produced and the Roman and Persian empires, it seems very feasible that this idea was internalized and then recast in the Quran, and it came from Roman sources like so much else. But that's all I'm going to say about it.
Okay, we'll leave it there on that particular topic.
Thank you.
This debate is that, are they familiar with the Abrahamic or Ishmaelite descent? It seems like, a few people, I kind of forgot exactly where I was going with this, but I'll just leave my question as it is.
Yeah, when did the story stabilize? So I believe,
I guess at least amongst the Arabs, when did it stabilize? Because a lot of us are confused. Did it happen? Was it the Quran or the preaching of Muhammad that kind of made them aware, or was it something that they knew about prior? I mean, maybe the Arabs closer to the Arabs in the Fertile Crescent maybe had been familiar because of their contact with Jews and Christians or whatnot. But how did it migrate all the way down to the Hijaz from that region? I mean, maybe this is an elementary question, but yeah, I'm a bit on the fence about it.
so in terms of how it might have migrated, so there are a lot of attested links between sort of the Roman Empire and the Hejaz region. Patricia Kroner wrote a very interesting article a long time ago about the leather trade between the Roman army and Meccan merchants. There are traditions that the Prophet spent time talking to monks in the Roman Empire, and I think one thing that's interesting to mention here is that we see again the sort of the impact of modern history on the way that we think about ancient history, because for a very long time that border between Jordan and Saudi Arabia was pretty much impenetrable, and so the Romans themselves had no concept of a southern boundary for the Roman province of Arabia, which stretched all the way down to what is now Al and even further, and it's not that much further on to go to Mecca, but certainly among modern historians, it's very tempting to see hard geographical boundaries as also sort of ideological boundaries where we think I'm guilty of this. One of the first articles I wrote was about Roman forts in Jordan, and one of the reviewers pointed out that I had completely ignored Roman forts in Israel because they were across the border. And that review was right, that my sort of geographical mindset was saying, well, I'm just looking at things happening in this country. But I think the connections between the Roman Empire and the Hejaz, and indeed between the Persian Empire and the Central Arabian sort of nexus where the Confederation of Mad is located, are actually quite robust. And there's a very free flowing movement of ideas between all these different areas. It's been argued by Shammai in the article I mentioned earlier that the Arabs of the 6th century and the 7th century are closely following the outcome of the conflict between Rome and Persia, and it's his discussion where he points out that Heraklius and the Prophet developed ideas of martyrdom and jihad at the same time, and his point is that there are no boundaries really between the movement of these ideas. So, as how did those ideas get into early Quranic discourse? I think it seems reasonable to infer that these ideas moved from the Roman Empire into Northern Arabia, where they were then internalized and recast in the Quran. As when they will sort of have achieved a definitive form, I believe in this section on Islam, Arabs and Empires, we talked about John Damascus in the 7th century as being the time when these ideas sort of achieved some kind of format that was stable.